the mysterious visitor, the used champagne glasses, the missing set of keys. Who was responsible for the savage killing of Danuta Kaczmarska? You're listening to Jason Lightoller from Tragedy Unravelled, a podcast dedicated to unresolved murder cases from the United Kingdom. The names are real, the evidence is chilling, and the truth is still out there. This podcast contains graphic details and discusses disturbing events of murder and violence that some may find upsetting. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Hall Green is a largely residential suburb in southeast Birmingham, West Midlands. Situated near the border of Solihull, it features leafy streets, excellent commuter links, and a rich history, including connections to J.L. Tolkien's The Shire. However, in 1986, it was the focus of a grisly murder scene. The night was closing in on the 22nd of January in 1986 in Coniston Close. Paul Kernich was using a slide projector in his living room. He was surprised and alarmed to suddenly notice smoke drift into his room, and, thinking that his house was ablaze, he made a 999 emergency call to the fire brigade. It was quickly established that it wasn't his house that was on fire, and the smoke was originating from a nearby property, that of Danuta Kaczmarska. Danuta Kaczmarska was a GP in Birmingham, and she split her time equally between the two surgeries that she owned. She was known as Dr. K due to the difficulty that some people had pronouncing her name. Dr. K originally trained as a medical doctor in her native Poland before relocating to the United Kingdom. She officially began practicing medicine in Birmingham in 1971. During the evening of the 21st of January 1986, Danuta called her sister Irina for a chat. Irina was in the middle of watching a cooking show on television, so she asked if she could call back. Danuta asked Irina not to call the next afternoon because she was expecting a visitor. The next morning, Danuta went shopping at her local supermarket. She stopped for a brief chat with someone she knew who passed her in the street, and, after exchanging some pleasantries, she said that she had to go and start preparing the evening dinner because she was expecting a guest later that evening. At 1:30 p.m, Danuta called her surgery to check for messages. By 3 p.m, she was back at the supermarket, this time to buy red wine. Half an hour later, at 3:30, she was seen by a neighbour returning home, alone. Danuta could not have possibly known what lay in wait for her. Having just arrived back from the supermarket, she shared a bottle of pink champagne with her mysterious visitor. Within the next 30 minutes, Danuta Kaczmarska was dead. Someone had forced a tea towel violently down her throat and knocked her into unconsciousness by hitting her 7 times in the head with an axe. At least 5 of these blows were to the back of her head, 1 to her forehead and 1 to her temple. Blood splatters found on the walls suggested that the attack began in the kitchen where Dr. K was found. The killer then put her inert body on top of a pile of bedding and pillows, poured petrol over her, and then set her body on fire. Danuta Kaczmarska was so badly charred that she had to be identified through dental records. A post-mortem examination revealed that Danuta Kaczmarska was unconscious but still alive when she was set alight, and that she had several skull fractures. There were signs of a severe struggle in the kitchen and that Danuta had fought for her life. Knives and items of food were found all over the floor, and the kitchen was in general chaos. After this appalling act, the killer picked up Danuta's own keys, calmly opened the front door, turned the lock twice to secure the mortise, and slipped away without being noticed. The keys and the axe have never been found. As there was no sign of forced entry to her house, and there was nobody seen arriving back with her at 3:30 in the afternoon, her killer must have been either already at the property or very nearby. Almost immediately after the murder, the police publicly revealed information about Danuta's private life as they believed it may shed light on the case. They were quoted as describing her as not the usual type of woman family doctor. The superintendent in charge of the murder case told reporters, "This has all the hallmarks of an Agatha Christie novel, and that Danuta was a Jekyll and Hyde character." They used various descriptions, including weird, double-edged, and seedy. Consequently, the media reported Danuta as having a double life, stating she was respectable during the day while working as a trusted doctor, but by night she was said to have roamed underground nightclubs, frolicking with people who were on the so-called undesirable lists. Much publicity was given to the fact that Danuta used dating agencies, contact magazines, and Lonely Heart advertisements. These are the equivalent of a dating app or website pre-internet. People described her as an emotionally unstable, vulnerable woman who was desperate for love. A great deal of attention was given to the way Danuta dressed. Her hairstyle was not typical of how people would have expected a middle-aged doctor to appear. Her hair was that from the spiky punk era, which was in various bright colours. She was vilified by some for being a smoker. Bearing in mind we are talking about attitudes that are now just over 40 years old, dating back to 1986, and times have now changed, with opinions and perspectives that are much more tolerable in society and in general more liberal. More than 6,000 people were spoken to during police inquiries. There were no witnesses that saw anything unusual around Danuta's house or heard any screams or cries for help. Robbery was not considered a motive. There was no evidence of the house being searched by her killer, and Danuta's handbag, which was also undisturbed, was still in the kitchen. Her purse was not stolen, and the house contained a total of £800, which is the equivalent to £3,000 in 2026, and this was in the form of cash and travellers' cheques, and there was no evidence of a sexual assault. A former lover and a colleague of Danuta's was arrested and questioned but released without charge. In an incredible coincidence, in 1982, 4 years before Dr. K's death, her friend and solicitor Thomas Gleeson, who shared the house with her, died in almost identical circumstances in the same house in an upstairs bedroom. Thomas Gleeson's body was so badly burned that he could only be recognised by a piece of footwear and some shirt buttons. An inquest in March of that year concluded that the fire was accidental, probably caused by a dropped cigarette or a faulty heater, and it gave the cause of death as smoke inhalation. The inquest verdict was death by misadventure. Despite the unbelievable similarities between the two deaths, in the same house, in almost the same manner, the police did not find any evidence to connect the two. 6 months later, after Danuta's murder, the incident room was closed down. The general accepted theory was that Danuta knew her killer and that he or she had let themselves into her house using a duplicate key when Danuta was out at the shops at 3 p.m. It's unknown if they were watching or waiting until she left. Perhaps they had arranged to meet her with false good news, which would account for the champagne, and as soon as Danuta turned her back, the attack began. There are several unanswered questions to this case. When was the fire started? If the theory was correct that Danuta was killed at 4 p.m. and the killer left straight away, this meant that the fire would have been burning for roughly 4 or 5 hours, as the fire brigade were not summoned until 9 p.m, and yet the damage was only contained to the ground floor. There was nothing else that appeared to be set alight, and the seat of the fire was Danuta's body. Did the killer start the fire immediately after murdering Danuta at 4 p.m, or did they remain in the house for some time afterwards and then start the fire several hours later? Or did the killer return to the house later in the evening and then start the fire? Was the time of death at 4 p.m. a correct estimate, and was Danuta in fact killed towards the night hours? Forensic testing was much less advanced back in the mid-1980s than by today's standards. Much of the evidence was destroyed in the intense heat of the fire. Unless there is the breakthrough in DNA evidence or a confession, it seems unlikely that after such a long passage of time, Danuta Kaczmarska's killer will be found. Danuta's father was terminally ill with cancer at the time of her death, and he died 6 days after she was murdered. As of the current time in 2026, this case remains unsolved. If you have any information relating to the murder of Danuta Kaczmarska, please contact the police by dialing 101, the UK non-emergency number, or you can give information anonymously to Crime Stoppers, the independent crime-fighting charity, on 0800 555 111. Thank you for listening to Tragedy Unravelled with me, Jason Lightoller. Behind every murder is a life that deserves to be remembered, understood, and never forgotten. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and thank you for joining me as we continue to unravel the truth.